Alright, we are at the start of the Whistler Gran Fondo 2025 in Vancouver. This is my third time doing the race, and I think this year was a little bit different because it was quite smoky outside, so I'm sure maybe 20-30% of the field, potentially 40% of the field, decided to defer to the following year, so we had a slightly smaller group. I think the total field size was around 2,500 people. So just to give you guys some info around the course profile, it's around 122K with 1,900 meters of elevation from Vancouver all the way to Whistler on the Sea to Sky Highway. So it's a really cool ride that you can do on a daily basis. There is a shoulder, which we ended up biking back after the race, but it's a little bit sketch with, cars going at 90 to 100 kilometers, and it's always really great to support a local organization to make sure that the race keeps going on a yearly basis. So in this first clip here, we're just rolling out from Stanley Park, and you'll see that my fingers are trying to come on screen, and that was because I, for some reason, wasn't able to get the camera to stop recording. I kind of wanted to get the recording of the beginning, of the get-go, and then save some of the battery for some more interesting footage, but it took me a bit of fiddling before I was able to turn it off. But the goal here was to start at the very front of the race, because in prior years we were starting around the 3:30 mark corral, which really puts you like 300-400 riders behind, and because you're in such narrow corners, it's impossible to catch up to the front. So the race time started around 7 a.m. and we got to the start line at 6 a.m. and we're quite near the front, so overall pretty happy. But because I was fiddling with my Insta360 here, I was definitely losing a few positions throughout the first few kilometers, which I ended up paying on the Taylor Way, which is the first real big climb. So you can see that there's a bridge on the far right hand corner. Technically the race is neutralized all the way past that point, so we're supposed to be like slowly rolling out, but you can see that it's still a pretty good pace that we have going. I would say I'm probably maybe 100 riders deep right now, so definitely a better position than other years, but not the ideal, as you can see that I'm continuously fiddling my device here. So we just got out of Stanley Park. There's a little climb, I would say. I would say it's around 1 kilometer at 4 or 5%, but because it's quote unquote neutralized, you only had to do around 250 to 300 watts in order to stay with the front group. Just to give some stats here, I think coming into the race I was around 73, 74 kilos. So that would put me around 3.8 to 4 watts to stay at the front, which is not too bad. So we're here on the Lionsgate Bridge, which is super cool. And you can see the guy in the pink jersey rolling through. That guy pulled me for like at least 10 kilometers. He is a key character in the early developments. Because after this bridge, you'll see that we will turn into a really steep hill, and because I'm already 100 riders back, it was quite difficult to try and catch up to the front, because if they're climbing at your speed, it's impossible to close the gap, since I'm definitely not the. You can see the cloud is decently smoky, but honestly the temperatures were hovering around 14 to 15 degrees, so it was very comfortable, and I wouldn't say that it hindered the experience too much at the very get-go. It was definitely worse Squamish onwards, but at the very beginning it was very enjoyable, and I had no complaints. So this bridge is normally a little sketchy when you're riding on a day-to-day, because you have to ride on the sidewalk and there are random bumps along the way which are meant to slow you down, but I feel like it's quite dangerous with how aggressive those bumps are. So it's quite nice that we have the 2 lanes closed here for us to just roll down. The whole point of this section is just to conserve your energy, because we're about to go 500-600 watts up Taylor Way in order to try and stay at the front. Alright, we're about to roll into Taylor Way here. You can see the pink guy is still in front of me. It continues to play a huge role in terms of being able to pull me the whole way. We have a nice roundabout here. Since my bike handling skills are not the greatest, I'm definitely losing a few positions here, but that's okay as long as I can keep up with this tall pink guy who is really the savior, as I've mentioned a few times. So you can see my heart rate is relatively relaxed as of now, but that's going to spike up real quickly. Just to give the viewers some background, I think the game plan was to try and stick with the front group until 70K. The first 70K is quite fast. I think we averaged around 38 kilometers an hour, and that's because it's mainly downhill with a few short punches. So if you can really go all out on the punches, that'll help you stay in the front group, which will ensure that you have a really nice draft the whole way. And I didn't really take my first pull until like kilometer 110 potentially. So you can see we just took the right-handed turn and we're about to hit the wall, and you can see the front of the race is not too far ahead, but because everyone's climbing at like 500-600 watts, it's really hard to catch up to the front. So we're just trying our best here to try and move up places, but I've already signed up for next year, and I know that if I can stick to the front through Stanley Park and the Lionsgate Bridge, then I know that I'll be better positioned for Taylor Way next time, and that I don't have to be spiking significantly just to hold and hopefully catch up to the front here. Normally my max heart rate is around probably high 170s, but I rarely reach that mark. So I'm basically at my limits here, putting out 500 something watts. And I think coming into the race, I thought that the climb was only this tailaway section, but it actually continued for another 2-ish kilometers up the highway, so I was really struggling. But I knew that if I was able to hold that pink jersey's wheel, that they can hopefully pull me back. So you can see the pink jersey is back in the view again, and we're trying to get to his wheel because that guy was at least 6'5" and was an amazing draft. Alright, here at kilometer 18, we've made it basically to the end of West Van, and we're starting to go onto Sea to Sky Highway, and we're basically at the tail end of the rolling hill, and we're about to be able to sit on for the next 40 kilometers, so it's really important to stay in the group here. There's around 50 or 60 people here in the front, so quite a decent group, and I was actually just always at the back of the group. I never actually pulled through, so I really much enjoyed the draft. But basically we hold this group all the way until Squamish, and then once the 6-7 kilometer climb started, I got dropped. But it was really important to be able to hold on to the fastest group so that we can really enjoy the draft here. we're enjoying another descent here. We're around kilometer 50, so we're pretty close to Squamish, and you can see that the sky is getting quite cloudy and smoky. So this is really where the air conditions get worse and worse. But you can see in the top left corner, the heart rate's around 130. We've really been chilling for a long time, just fully drafting, so it's been a good train so far. So I think there was like a 1 or 2 kilometer kicker, in which I got dropped from the group before Squamish, and my whole goal was to just stay with the front group until Squamish, so I was quite motivated to catch back up. You can see that my heart rate is really near its max, and I'm trying to pull my way back to the back of the group. I think there were maybe 2 or 3 people sitting on my draft, and I think I eventually flicked the elbow to get someone to close the gap, or maybe we'll bring it back. But it was really important for us to push all the way through so that we can continue sending the draft for like another 20 kilometers here. So at the top of the Squamish climb, which was, like I said, 6, 7 kilometers, there was a group of three of us here: the purple J. Colula shirt guy and the blue shirt guy. So the purple Alula shirt, we actually stuck together until maybe kilometer 110, and then he dropped us. But me and the blue shirt guy actually went all the way. So at this point, we were cooperating pretty well. I think we ended up biking just the three of us for the next 12 to 15 kilometers before we were picked up by a group. But we were trading poles pretty well, so this was a fun group to be in. So in this clip, we were just waiting for the group that was right behind us to catch up, because once they come by, you have to hop on to the draft, or else you'll get dropped quickly. So we were just being cognitive that this whole group was passing us. So this was the end of our trio, but we had a great time. And I think the group that was catching us was actually one of the leading groups of the Forte, which is essentially the Gran Fondo, but you include a Cypress climb, which is a HC climb. I think it's 10-11 kilometers at 7%, so it's pretty steep, and then you do the Gran Fondo. So they had a pretty big group here. I think it was around 15 to 20 people, so we just sat in the draft here for, I think, the next 10-15 kilometers. In this clip, I wanted to just get a quick view of the folks in the white jersey. So that's actually, I think, the Aritzia corporate team. So there were around 10, 15 of them, and they were all wearing a full white kit, which I'm not sure is the best kit to be wearing when you're super sweaty, but it was pretty cool. They had a pickup truck that was basically following the team and then supplying them with their own bottles. So they were cooperating pretty well, and they were basically pulling the whole time. So this was a good group to be part of. So at the very end, it was only the blue guy and myself. I think we were dropped around maybe kilometer 110, and then we just wanted to prevent anyone else from passing us. So for the next 10-ish kilometers, we worked pretty well together trading poles. And the last part isn't too difficult, so we weren't pushing too hard, but it was nice to have someone to go to the end with.